It makes you vulnerable. And this is a big worry for Stoicism. I disagreed with a lot of what popular Stoicism was saying about ancient Stoicism. So as you know, it's become highly hot on internet and other kinds of podcasts, daily digests. There are practices, meditation, and it's become very popular in Silicon Valley. A sort of a tech bro mentality. As one person said, it is the perfect practice for those with big egos who need to contain them. So think big, dream big, but also contain your ego. So unlike Buddhism, where it's a sort of silent meditation, Stoicism is very chatty. It's ancient Greek and Roman discursive method. And what's fascinating is that it's caught on in part because it's so practical, unlike perhaps reading Plato or Aristotle, my favorite actually, a bit harder read. The Roman Stoics made it a street philosophy, to be sure. And the idea of this Western Zen, you might say, as a self-improvement, self-enhancement, self-help method really annoyed me. It was a thorn in my side as I got on a lot of podcasts, in part because I think of philosophy, and especially ancient philosophy, is very much about community, about common good, a pursuit that involves, as Aristotle might say, us as social beings. And I really sort of wondered, is ancient Stoicism really, as many modern Stoics put forth, about toughing it up, inner grit, resilience that relies very much on the self? I was at the military academies for about 20, 30 years. I taught on and off there as the first chair in ethics at the Naval Academy in the States. And the mantra amongst my midshipmen and officers was, suck it up and truck on, or less elegantly, embrace the suck. And the idea being it's not going to be what you like, but it's your job to endure. And that resonated a lot. But I have a clinical psychology background as well as philosophy. And I really worried as I worked very closely. 20 years of forever wars, I was a consultant with the military for a while, of the curses, not just the blessings, but the curses of thinking that you could be invulnerable, perhaps. Some people advertise Stoicism as the philosophy of anti-fragility. It struck me as problematic. So what was missing in much of the modern recasting of Stoicism was how we might be connected to each other and that be part of our resilience. We know social supports are part of resilience. That's a common theme in current psychology. So I wanted to explore, something beyond stiff upper lip. An American phrase, actually, not British, I learned. So let's just remember who these folks are that are being brought into the modern conversation. So we have this really anti-conventionalist, iconoclast guy named Diogenes, the cynic. He was a character. He slept in a clay tub. When asked, where are you from? Everywhere and nowhere. I'm a citizen of the universe. The term cosmopolitan comes from that. He believed that you deface the coinage or the currency because it's not what's really true and valuable. And the Stoics picked up on that. So this guy Zeno of Citium goes, there's a shipwreck. He's a dye merchant, and he wanders around the Athenian agora. There are much like this, maybe, bookstores and the like, and he decides that maybe philosophy is his calling. And he sets up a shop, a way to meet disciples and followers, and in the one of the many stoa in the Athenian marketplace, and it was called the painted stoa, the stoa poikile. So stoics come from that term stoa, a portico. So Zeno and his and two other patriarchs of the movement, Cleanthes and Chrysippus, really develop a very thorough and full philosophy where one of the themes is how to protect yourself against the slings and arrows of fortune, we might say, the vicissitudes of change, tragedy, loss, grief, things that are outside your virtue, your soul. And when it transitions into the Roman period with Cicero as a translator, and then we're moving on to familiar folks, perhaps Epictetus, very popular these days because he has pithy witticisms that are easy to catch. And one of his students, not that he knew it was a student, he himself was enslaved, but the Emperor Marcus Aurelius was very moved by Epictetus's thought. And then Seneca, a court minister to Nero and remarkable speechwriter. These are all Stoics who really could make Stoicism a street philosophy in a certain way. And that is what it became. It had always been the philosophy of what you were taught in your households, boys, men, but it really sort of grabbed hold. And its notions were, sort of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, that goodness is the excellence of the soul, so it's inner. Whereas Aristotle had really emphasized our vulnerability, that we're not self-sufficient alone. Self-sufficiency is relational. For a family, for you living with friends, and spending days together with others. The theme that the Stoics picked up on, rather, is that goodness and your happiness is really just inner. And so you can retreat to inside as the true haven of freedom, especially for a slave. Like Epictetus, this was how you found liberation, psychological liberation. But the question is the retreat to the self, which in modern talk becomes a lot of methods for self-perfection and optimization in a certain way. But how social is it? Well, I think it is. And that's what I try to argue in Stoic wisdom. For example, Marcus Aurelius, who's writing these meditations to himself, he had no intention to publish them. They were just diary notes, really, jottings. When he was along the Danube fighting the Germanic campaigns, and he essentially says, if you've ever seen a hand, a foot separated from the trunk of a person, that's what we make of ourselves if we cut ourselves off from others. The idea being that we are connected. They all had this idea of the organic wholes, but we are connected to each other as fellow citizens in the globe. It becomes an empire discussion for Marcus, but there's a sense of we're connected. That gets lost a lot in the self-help movement version of Stoicism. And he even tweaks it, you get glimmers of that when he, in the meditation, says, I'm so grateful to my mother and the grammarian who taught me, who tolerated my howlers, he says, or my malapropisms, essentially, my art teacher. There's sort of a sense that I'm in debt to others. I can't go it alone. So another lesser known character in this field is a guy named Heracles. And he spoke of circles. There's an inner circle of the self, and then it keeps going outward, kith and kin, to the whole globe. And your job, he says, is to zealously transfer from the outer to the inner. So it's a sort of a way of extending your circles and bringing others into the center. And the idea of zealously transferring is a sort of idea of imagining empathically what's out there and others out there quite different and bringing them to your center. So, but in all this, if you're connected to others and socially dependent on them on occasion, and your grit or resilience, they would say constancy of character, comes or requires the support of others, it makes you vulnerable. And this is a big worry for Stoicism. How do you handle emotions of grief that register loss, of anger, that those you are connected with or loved betray you or leave you, or grief in the sense die, and so you are less able to go on. And the interesting part of Stoicism is that they're neologists. They have all new words for things. They rethink what the others are that are outside your virtue, and they call them all indifference, not with a CE, but TS. The things that don't make a difference. They don't make or break your happiness, you might say. So the losses and the offenses and the insults and the disappointments and failures and the inability to reach your goals, you could be vulnerable, especially because of what's outside your control. So how do you strengthen yourself in the case of your connectedness, whether it's to adequate health, adequate wealth, good friends, the like. And one way is you think of them as indifference, but you also change the way you approach them.
To continue watching this video, click the link in the top left or in the description below. Or visit iai.tv for more debates and talks from the world's leading thinkers on today's biggest ideas.